Hey there, Georgie here with Ukraine Matters. Pay attention now. Listen. Do you hear it? It's the sound of the cognitive dissonance of all of those people that have been claiming that Ukraine is running low on manpower, is running low on resources, and cannot do anything against the advancing Russians. Well, sucks to be them, because already in a month's time, Ukraine has actually conducted a second offensive in the Kursk region of Russia. Why is this important? Well, because the territory of Russia in the Kursk region, if we are potentially heading to some kind of diplomatic settlement of the conflict, it's basically gold. Exchanging maybe a couple of hundred of kilometers of the Russian territory could be exchanged for maybe thousands of kilometers of Ukrainian territory. So it's extremely valuable ground for Ukraine to have and have leverage over the Russians. What happened is yesterday we started getting reports from the Russian propaganda channels that Ukrainians are advancing in the Kursk region. And as always, Ukrainian sources are dead silent. We get absolutely no details. So all of the information is coming from the Russian sources. It was reported that yesterday Ukraine started accumulating forces around the city of Sudzha that they control and around the northern part close to Mala Lokhnya. Now, the northern part, there is nothing too exciting here. Russians just started some kind of attacks there. It's also claimed that North Koreans have come back to the front lines. And supposedly it's just Ukrainians sending additional reinforcements to stop the Russian advances. A more interesting situation happened on this southeastern side of the front line, where Ukrainians actually set up multiple columns of equipment and went down the major roads of the Kursk region here. Since then, Russians have been claiming that they have been burning everything, destroying everything, that Ukrainians achieved absolutely nothing, and then they have been posting videos of Ukrainian equipment being destroyed by the FPV drones, which is normal for this war. This is always happening. However, it seems that Ukrainians have learned and adapted since the last time they did an attack and were not really achieving that much. This time, later in the day, we already had confirmations that Ukrainians not only entered the Cherkasska-Konopelka, but actually captured it. Moreover, today we also got a confirmation that Ukrainians have also captured the Fanaseevka. So that means right now, by best estimates that we have, that Ukrainians have taken control of 2 additional settlements. The reports are they also advanced along this road and captured this intersection with the rail line over here, which would effectively expand this territory to about this big. And the general discussion is whether or not Ukrainians will be able to capture this bigger settlement of Ulanok in this area. If they will be able to do so, let's say within a week or so, that will be a major success for the current state of the Kursk offensive. Russians have a dominant advantage in this area. They have been trying to push Ukrainians out, but they have not been successful in this. And now, if suddenly they decided to rotate out, relax, maybe freeze the situation a little bit, and Ukrainians are just saying, no, 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 you don't. You're gonna be fighting for every single square kilometer of this land, and we're gonna force you to dedicate more resources here. So they activated their forces again, and now they're threatening the Russians' positions again, and this is forcing the Russian counter-reaction to again send in more resource into the area. Absolutely amazing. I am not, however, expecting a lot of results for this. As I say, the biggest goal that I think Ukrainians could achieve is capture the settlement of Ulanok. This is because of the 2 things. Firstly, because there is a lot of the Russians in the area, and the reports are that they already are sending in reinforcements. And secondly, I see how much resources Ukraine is using in this area. We've seen those columns. It is a lot. There is a lot of tanks. There is a lot of Max Pros. There is a lot of the infantry fighting vehicles. But it's not an overwhelming force. It's not like it's a massive, devastating force that could breach through a lot of the Russian-controlled territory. The reports are that this was a surprise attack because Russians were going on rotation, and also the weather was not super favorable to fly a lot of the FPV drones on the Russian side, and they were forced to only use the drones that are wire-guided, the optical wire-guided drones. which is potentially why Ukrainians decided to go for this offensive. If that is the result, then it's great. Ukrainians have captured, some estimate, about 30 to 100 square kilometers additional Russian territory, which is great news, and we're going to monitor it further. Then I want to tackle another question that's getting asked a lot is, why is Russia still continue advancing around the Pokrovsk area? Why Ukraine is not able to stop it? And I think the best person that answered that question was Perpetua. He's a great analyst. He's been counting a lot of the destruction in this war. So I will leave the link to this channel. Please visit him. He has a lot of the very analytical perspective, very fact-based. If you're in that kind of content, I will recommend it very much. But he answered it I think in those simple terms that I describe it the best. So we have here this kind of a square, which is about 4 by 4 kilometers. And in this square right here, there is about a division of the Russian forces. So that's like 15-ish thousand Russian forces, including a lot of the heavy equipment and so on. This is the concentration of forces that is stupidly condensed. A division, as Andrew explains, should operate maybe in hundreds of kilometers front line, not 4 by 4 square kilometers, and not within a 4 by 4 kilometers. So Russians are hyper concentrating their forces in this area. Now, does this cause them to lose a lot of forces? Because you can imagine, it's just logically, if you concentrate your forces, then they're going to just get struck from all sides by the Ukrainian armed forces, by all of the drones, by everything. And you would be absolutely correct, because that is exactly what is happening on this front line. But Russians are just continuing sending their forces to a meat grinder. And unfortunately, Ukrainians don't want to follow in the same step. And they don't want to hyper-concentrate their forces, so the Russians would be able to destroy Ukrainian defenders with the same intensity. That is a great answer, I think, and very logical to why Russians keep advancing. Then let's get to some other good news for Ukraine, and I think they will be very much aviation themed, because the first one is that the French Mirage jets are already reportedly been delivered to Ukraine. And Mirage jets, the first batch, will probably be used for training purposes, so I would not expect them to be noticed in action that quickly. But what we can say for sure is that additional F-16 jets from Netherlands will most definitely be used in the front lines of Ukraine. Now, I know the approximate number of jets that are right now operating in Ukraine, but I haven't seen any Russian channels talking about it. So I cannot tell you how much it is, just because of my policies for the operational security. But it is already a very respectable number, and I'm quite certain that we're going to hear more and more of F-16's operations on the front lines in Ukraine. Beyond that, General Syrskyi has made claims with regards to the negotiations on Gripen fighter jets deliveries to Ukraine. The talks are ongoing. Supposedly they were on pause for some time ago, but now they have either been restarted or continuing being tried to be restarted. We're somewhere in that space. Continuing the aviation theme, something extremely dreadful has happened around the Zaporizhia region for Russians. Ukrainian defense forces have reported that they have shut down Russian glide bombs. And this is pretty bad, but there is a good explanation for why it happened. So the bombs, that aviation bombs that are being used by Russia, are extremely devastating. If we're talking about the amount of destruction that any kind of weapons can deal on the front line, then aviation bombs are one of the most nasty ones. Those are the things that can literally change the landscape of war, and I'm talking about physical landscape, not the operational metaphorical one. No, literally they can create hills and craters so big that they change the whole structure of how the war is being performed. And the big problem for Ukrainians is that these bombs, they are able to destroy very secure, very well thought out positions for Ukraine. And at the start of the war, Russians would just fly their planes, and then they would drop the bombs on the Ukrainian positions. This has been since prevented because Ukrainians got a lot of the man pads, then they got some additional anti-air systems, then they got longer range systems, and it created big problems for the Russian aviation, as the Russian aviation just couldn't just fly over the target and drop these aviation bombs. So at some point they came out with this solution, the glide bombs. And first glide bombs, they were kind of rough, but they allowed essentially Russian jets to fly very low along the ground, so not being detected by a lot of the radars and not being able to shut down them. And then they would kind of lift their nose into the air, and then they would drop the bomb, and it would kind of glide a little bit to the Ukrainian positions and destroy them. And this tactic worked for them. And this was, let's say, at first about 5 to 10 kilometer distance that the Russian jets were doing it. At some point, Ukrainians realized what Russians are doing, and they're starting to set up these traps for the Russians. Either it's people with man pads, or mobile groups, or some kind of roaming Patriot system. So additional pressure was put on the Russian engineers to perfect this glide bomb design. And we came out to a more current design that Russians have been using, which is closer to about 40 kilometers, these glide bombs of Russians that are being able to be dropped on Ukrainian positions. This obviously complicated the system. It required it to have bigger sensors, because the longer the distance of the glide bombs that it travels, the more precise equipment it needs to have to hit actually the target that it's aimed for. But this has already created problems for the Ukrainians, because now no kind of Ukrainian anti-air systems was really efficient to intercept the Russian planes. They were just too far. Ukrainians have adapted some techniques to that, including some of their aviation, including some of their longer range missile systems. So now Russians had a lot of pressure to actually use these glide bombs around the 40-kilometer radius. So the new development of the Russian aviation bombs that they did was the new design that allowed to strike Ukrainian targets on already about 80 to 90 kilometers range. That is pretty far away from the launch point. So at this moment, we're already talking like some of the more advanced anti-air systems, both Ukrainians not being able really to target these planes, and they could just rain these bombs down on the Ukrainian positions. The problem that is happening is that because the distance is now so long, it takes a while for these bombs to actually travel to Ukrainian position. So now this opened a window of opportunity for Ukrainians to not just intercept the planes, but potentially even intercept these glide bombs, because the distance traveled allows for some countermeasures to be developed. Now, I don't have any specific confirmation of what exactly has been used to intercept these glide bombs, but we do have a video of the Wild Hornets drone development group that have been showing their aerial interceptor drones. They have been claiming that this drone is supposedly there to intercept the Shahed drones, but it's a very, very powerful machine. It flies extremely fast, it's navigable, it's pretty maneuverable. We will see in this video, for example, if I stop it here, then people noted that about at 45% power used, this drone is able to achieve the speeds of over 200 kilometers per hour. So that's pretty fast. And as you can see in the video later on, the design of the drone is literally like a torpedo that is just being propelled through the air. And it's actually able to fly around those heights where the aviation bombs could also be used. So if this is actually true, if the Ukrainians are able to develop technology to intercept the glide bombs, not just use the glide bombs themselves, this is a major problem for Russians, because the only reason for Russians that they were able to advance all this time, yes, they were concentrating a lot of forces on the ground, but the forces need support, and Russian artillery cannot really provide that support anymore because Ukrainians have been really decommissioning a lot of the Russian artillery. They've been really good with HIMARS strikes and so on. Their counter-artillery fight of Ukrainians have been exceptional. But because Russians were able to use these aviation bombs, and because they were so efficient and from such a long distance that they couldn't really be targeted, we could potentially see this Russian advancement option to be negated and destroyed by Ukrainians. Great news. Go Ukraine. Continuing some of the drone question, I want to show this article. Now, I would recommend everyone that is interested in drone technology just to read this article in general. I will leave a link in the description. But here, I think the best line of the article that I can point to is answering the question, well, what's the Ukrainian drone capacity? While we don't know the actual numbers, we can look at the dynamics that Ukraine has been undergoing. So here, the drone production agency states that in 2022, we could produce up to 5 long-range strike drones per month. Now, we are producing more than 500. This is a 100-time increase in a span of just 2 years. That is massive, and I am sure that Ukrainians are not planning on stopping, so it's only going to get worse for Russia, for Russian oil depots, for Russian ammunition storage facilities. Ukraine is going to strike deeper and deeper, if I can quote the modern classic. Then I want to do something extremely special. I want to acknowledge the people of Slovakia and actually Germany as well. Because on this channel I cry and complain a lot, and I understand that. This is just how I feel. That we are not doing nearly enough to combat the authoritarian tendencies that are being pushed down our throat, that there is a war that is being fought against us. And during the last week or so, Slovakian and German people have been really stepping up to go out and express their opinion. So I want to state thank you. Thank you so much to people of Slovakia, Germany, and actually everywhere else in Europe that I'm just not mentioning here, but that are still doing the work and going out and actually making us clear that we will not become any kind of fascistic state, that we will not submit to dictatorship and anti-democracy. I love you all. Thank you so much. Then in the same sense, I want to do something very unique, and I want to acknowledge the Russians that are actually doing something. Now, I have a reputation of being like a major Russophobe and supposedly hating and dismissing everything and everyone Russian, which is absolutely not true. My only wish is that Russia is a normal state, but unfortunately it is not. But beyond the point, I want to acknowledge the efforts that these Russians, some unknown guys, did, because some of the Russian drone pilots did a fundraiser to order the virtual reality glasses that Russian drone operators need to fly in the drones. Well, these ones that came and was received by Russians are very, very special, because they had some explosives mounted in them. So someone knew about this order, intercepted it, created this trap, like 3D printed this part, inserted it into the glasses, and was hoping that the Russian drone operators would have an explosive surprise. It got intercepted, but still A+ for the effort. So there is a lot of the Russian resistance that are actually doing something. I just want to acknowledge them and not the people that are just yelling on TV about please lift off the sanctions from the Russian oligarchs. Those guys can go F themselves. And then final is to cover the state of the Russian military. I'm pretty sure you already saw this news multiple times, but yes, we have been flooded with the fact that Russians have sent in donkeys to the Russian armed forces. And these are not some donkeys that are just happen to come by, or some volunteers sent them donkeys. No, there are reports from Russians and Russian sources that it's the Russian Ministry of Defense that are sending donkeys to the Russian armed forces. And the reason for that is because donkeys technically are counted as a mode of transportation in some of the parts of the Russian Federation. You can easily imagine that, like somewhere in the mountains where there's a impassable region, then the Russian armed forces can have the paper that declares that technically you can use donkeys to deliver ammunition and so on. Well, they thought is like, since this is a transportation vehicle, so let's just send it off. Obviously, this has nothing to do with any kind of mountain operation. Ukraine have mountains, but not in the region where the fighting is happening, and we are getting the reports that donkeys are being received not by some mountaineer groups that are used to operate with donkeys, but by something like Marine Corps or something of the Russian Federation, which has like literally nothing to do with the donkeys. And don't get me wrong, if this would be on Ukrainian side, I would not say a word, because Ukraine is defending itself, and Ukraine is a lot less resource dense. It just doesn't have the Russian resources to continue fighting this war yet. But the fact is that this is a war of aggression. This is a war of choice by Russia. They are so freaking all in that they are just running out of any kinds of mode of transportation, that they're degrading to using donkeys on the front line. They can stop this war yesterday or today or tomorrow, at any moment, at any second. And there are plenty of different opportunities. There's plenty of politicians that would give Putin a leeway if he wants to, but he doesn't. And that is the core point of why Russian army is shit. And if you want to see Russian armed forces degrade further and maybe use some of the Bronze Age technology, please continue supporting the Ukrainian armed forces. Participate in our fundraiser. We are already over 50% to the major goal of 250,000. Participate, guys. This matters. This saves lives. Support the Ukrainian armed forces. Trust in Ukrainian armed forces. I love you. Slava Ukraini. And I will see you next time.